Former MDC leader and former finance minister of Zimbabwe, Tendai Biti, will be joining us on the phone line. Very good morning to you, Mr. Biti. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Just talk to us through your thoughts regarding the recent developments in Zimbabwe, starting with President Mugabe's televised address last night.
Well, that was a foolish statement by a very foolish old man. The country is burning. The country has rejected him, starting with his most trusted soldiers who have carried out a coup, followed by the people of Zimbabwe who came out in their millions across the globe, not just in Zimbabwe. From New York to Cape Town, Zimbabweans expressed a desire to see him go as a matter of urgency to his own party, which on Sunday rejected him. So for him, at 94 years, after 37 years of a total mess, to continue humiliating not only himself, but also the country, and pushing the country on the edge of a precipice is totally irresponsible for President Robert Mugabe. He must go, and go yesterday.
Now, he's been given an ultimatum to actually resign by 12 noon today, which is just a few minutes away. Do you think he might heed this ultimatum and actually tender his resignation?
He's never going to resign. Never. In fact, the more you give him threats, the more he digs in, because that's what he knows. He's institutionalized power. If you cut his veins, blood doesn't ooze out. Some strange hydro substance called power will ooze out of him.
Now, we know that Parliament is sitting tomorrow, and according to the ultimatum, if he doesn't resign by 12 o'clock, impeachment proceedings will commence. Do you think that MDC and other parties and other members of Parliament will actually try and vote him out through parliamentary processes tomorrow?
No, it's not instant coffee. There's due process. What will happen tomorrow if the motion is pushed? It has to be adopted by a supermajority. When it's adopted by a supermajority, then a 9-person commission is appointed to investigate the charge. And of course, in this process, the accused person, namely the president, will have a right to be heard. So it's not going to happen tomorrow. The motion can be pushed tomorrow, but the actual motion for it to carry through requires due process. So we are a few weeks away from actual impeachment.
Now, you mentioned something about possibly power oozing from Mugabe's veins. There's a principle in the party, ZANU-PF, this principle of one center of power. What do you think of it, and do you think it should be removed from their constitution?
I'm not a member of ZANU-PF. Why should I speak on ZANU-PF's constitution? But at a national constitution, we gave too much power in Chapter 5 of our constitution. We created an imperial president, an imperial monarchy. So one of the things that we have to do in the transition, when we go back to legitimacy, which is what we've been pushing for, is a clear revisit of the Constitution, particularly the obnoxious provisions of Chapter 5 of our Constitution, which give too much power in one person.
Well, just lastly, what can we expect to unfold then in the next few days? You have mentioned that there's nothing like instant coffee, that these things do take time, but what can we expect to start seeing in Zimbabwe?
Well, I think that, number one, Mugabe must go. Number two, there must be discussions now on a roadmap back to legitimacy. Number three, there must be discussions on setting up a transitional authority, a transitional mechanism with the clear functions of democratization, economic reform, institutional reform to launch Zimbabwe on a sustainable, irrevocable path to stability, to democracy, and to economic upliftment, so that in a few years' time we don't have another coup and Zimbabwe doesn't continue being in the news for wrong reasons. And this process will require international guarantee, international underwriting. So SADC clearly has a role to play. The African Union clearly has a role to play. The UN Security Council clearly has a role to play. And SADC this time must not play the role of power retention and status quo retention as it did when Mbeki was given the mandate as South African president in 2007 at the Dar es Salaam Extraordinary Summit of SADC. SADC must know that it's a regime change agenda, it's a stability agenda, it's a democratization agenda. So SADC itself needs a new paradigm shift.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Biti, for joining us here on Ground Report. That was Tendai Biti, the former MDC leader and also former finance minister of Zimbabwe, expressing his thoughts regarding the leadership of President Robert Mugabe, mentioning that he should step down as a matter of urgency and a reform map should be drawn up.